Kakalosh Boker Tov, Masechet Yoma, Shavua Tov, Masechet Yoma, Kavchet Amud Aleph, 28a1. We were talking about where the Gemara is going to ask the following question. Okay, the Gemara asks, Vare Evarim Ubdarim. Evarim Ubdarim are after the Trumat Adeshin. Remember that we find that after the Haktarat, there was Haktarat Evarim Ubdarim, which means that they used to bring up the limbs and the fats, which was done after the Trumat Adeshin. And still, right, it's an avodah that a person's chayav mita. Now, we had a general rule that we learned yesterday. We did learn a general rule yesterday that when there's an avodah after another avodah, and that's what it says yesterday on the last lines, it says, does there exist an avodah which is after another avodah and it's psula bizar? So you're going to say that a stranger, cannot do it, and he's going to be chayav mita? Now, 1 second. Since after the Sidura Maracha, you had to put the Shnei Gzirei Etzim. Remember, Sidura Maracha on the Mizbeach, you had a Maracha. You had like the bonfire, right? You had these, but it was very organized, right? Yeah. Okay. So if right now you're going to have it, so now what? Are you going to tell me now in such a scenario, right, that it's going to be kasher, right? So it's because the Shnei Gzirei Etzim, which are the two pieces of wood that you're going to put onto the Mizbeach, right afterwards, he says, so now you're going to say that the Zar is not chayav mita, right? But now 1 second. Why would you be chayav mita al seder maracha? It says there's also evarim uptarim, which means after the Trumat Adeshin, right? It says the Trumat Adeshin was zekuka laktarat evarim. And that's how it finished the evarim. So the evarim, the limbs were finished right after this Trumat Adeshin. So he says for sure, the zman of the aktarat evarim started during the daytime, and you could do it the entire day, correct? So he says, if it was possible, obviously. Now the Trumat Adeshin was only going to be at nighttime. So he says, since Aktarat Evarim and Trumat Adeshin were done in different times, so there's no connection between the two different types of services, and therefore the Aktarat Evarim is considered an avodah that there's nothing afterwards, another avodah. So the same halacha should apply to the Sidur Malacha. Since the Sidur Malacha is nighttime, so we shouldn't compare it to the Sidur Shnei Gzirei Etzim, which is only going to be during the daytime. So therefore, right, you should be chayav, and don't consider it an avodah which has an avodah afterwards, which means one more time, yeah, when you, general rule, you have an avodah and another avodah afterwards, since they're connected, so therefore on the first avodah that a person does, he's not chayav mita b'idei shemayim, even though he's a zar, he's a stranger and he does it. Why? Because there's an avodah afterwards, there's a service afterwards, but they have to be connected. Says the Gemara, what happens to do with the Haktarat Evarim Updarim, the bringing up the limbs and the fats? We said since it's not at the same time, they're disconnected. The fact that they're disconnected, if a person does do it, he is chayav mita b'idei shemayim. So ask the Gemara, according to this, the same thing would happen to Shnei Gzirei Etzim. Even though these two blocks of wood, right, where we showed you the picture, right, the two blocks of. So this is the picture of the Shnei Gzirei Etzim. This is the Maracha Gdolah. Right here is the Maracha Gdolah, right, the big wooden altar. And then here, the two Kohanim, they have the two pieces of wood, right? Each one has the Shnei Gzirei Etzim, two pieces of wood. So these two pieces of wood are being thrown inside. So he's saying, just like the Haktarat Evarim Pdarim, right? Just like by these Evarim Pdarim, it's considered separate from the Trumat Adeshin, and therefore, since they're disconnected, if a person is going to come and do them, either one, they're going to be considered chayav mita b'idei shemayim if they're a stranger. Why? Because at the end of the day, they're disconnected, and I don't consider an avodah which has another avodah afterward. Ask the Gemara, the same thing should apply to the Shnei Gzirei Etzim. This maracha was going to be kosher to do it at nighttime, and the Shnei Gzirei Etzim was going to be done during the day. So if it's going to be done during the day, it should be done like this. Okay? So now says the Gemara, okay? Answers the Gemara, sof avodah diemamahi. Says the Gemara, no, it's not true. Why? Right? He says, really, be'emet, I'm going to say that an avodah, that it has a certain time, that it does have another avodah after it, right, is considered an avodah sheyesh avodah achareya, right? And a zar, a stranger, is not going to be chayav mita. Therefore, when you do the Sidura Maracha, which is basically the Maracha on the Mizbeach, as we already brought down the wood, right, which you're putting for the Mizbeach. So since there is the avodah v'shnei gzirei etzim, you're not going to be chayav. Right? To do with the Aktarat Evarim, it is considered an avodah tamah to be obligated. Why? Because it's sof avodah diemamahi. Because it's the end of yesterday's work. Okay, and therefore the Trumat Adeshin doesn't have to do with Aktarat Evarim, right? And it's not just like a finishing off. The opposite. The Aktarat Evarim is actually something different tafel from yesterday, because it could have been done from the Avodah yesterday. So therefore it has nothing to do with something afterwards. And the Trumat Adeshin was the beginning of today's service. It's separate. One more time. When do you do Aktarat Evarim Uptarim? In the nighttime. But really, Be'emet, it's shayach to yesterday. It's yesterday's burning of the limbs and the fats. The Trumat Adeshin is the exact opposite. When does it start? This morning. This morning by Amud Shachar or before, whatever it is, that's when it starts the concept of the Trumat Adeshin. So if it's going to be the Trumat Adeshin, it's nothing to do with yesterday's things. It has to do with today. So therefore, you can compare the two cases. So ask the Gemara, Vare Trumat Adeshin. 1 second. The Trumat Adeshin does have something afterwards, because we just said that you had the Shnei Gzireitim afterwards. So answers the Gemara, Techilat Avodah Diyemamahi. It's the beginning of the service of the day. Tamar Rabbi Yochanan Kiddush Yadav LeTrumat Adeshin. If a person did Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim for Trumat Adeshin at nighttime, Lemachar, the next morning, remember that we're all in the same period. Meaning, let's say this morning at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, a Kohen went and he did Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim. And again, I'll show you the picture of Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim. This is the Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim. Remember, the Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim had to be that he puts one hand on top of a foot. So he's doing one hand, 1 foot, and then the next hand on 1 foot. Okay, this is the Kior, if you remember that we said that we had 12 spouts in order that 12 Kohanim could do it at all one shot, right? And then over here, he has to do one hand with a foot, and then he's going to switch and do this hand in the foot. Okay, because it's always going to be a foot until Kiddush Yadayim Viraglaim. So it has to be done one hand in a foot, and then the next hand in the foot. It was always done together. That's called the Kiddush Yadayim Viraglaim. Okay? The next one is already for 2 days. Yes, that's the way that they do their Netilat Yadayim. Yeah? Okay? 12 spouts. Okay? Bezrat Hashem. Bezrat Hashem. We'll be able to get to quicken this process for the Kohanim. Yeah?
No, I have a group, so they send, I don't have the book.
Yeah. So says the Gemara, Ela Kashya. But rather, Be'emet, we still have a question. How does Rabbi Yochanan come and he says that a stranger that's going to do Sidur Malacha is going to be Chayav Mitah? 1 second. He's only going to be Chayav Mitah on Avodah Tamah, but not on Avodah that has another Avodah afterwards. Remember, Avodah Tamah means complete. Tam is Tam Benishlam, right? When you finish something off, you write down Tam, right? Kasha Tamu, it finishes, right? So when it says Tam, it means to finish, right? Not only just complete, right? Or innocent. Right, tamim tia, right? There's different words, right? So here the tam means you finish something off. So he says, 1 second, when you already did an avodah tamah, which means you finished off one avodah, that's when you're going to be chayav. But not when you did an avodah after another avodah. So says the Gemara, elayit marachim yomer. But this is what it really means to say. Amar Rabbi Yasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Yasi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Zar shesider shnei gzireitim chayav. You're right. On the seder amaracha, meaning on the setting up of the wood on the mizbeach, you're not going to be chayav. If you did that on the Mizbeach, if a Zar did it. Remember, Zar means a stranger.
Says he is liable. He is liable to death at the hand of heaven.
No, he's not.
A non-Kohen who arranged the blocks of wood on the pyre is liable
The
to
2
death.
blocks of wood. I'm talking about Sidur Maracha. Remember, one more time. There's the full Maracha, and then there's the Shnei Gizir Eitzim. Shnei Gizir Eitzim were the 2 blocks of wood afterwards. So, says the Gemara, really, Be'emet, you're right. What does that mean? If you did the Seder HaMaracha, you're not going to be chayav. Why? Because you didn't finish. The 2 blocks of wood is a finishing. But if a person did the 2 blocks of wood, he's going to be chayav mitah. Why? Because that's a finishing touch. Right? That's a finishing job. So says the Gemara, Matkif la Rava. Rava comes and he says, Ela mi'ata. Now, if you're going to tell me that the Sidur Shnei Gizir Eitzim is the full melacha, and therefore a person would be chayav mitah if he does that, so to buy pais, so then you should do a lottery then, right? Because remember, the lottery was in order to choose which coin is going to do the Shnei Gizir Eitzim, which coin is going to bring up the 2 pieces of wood. Okay, so says the Gemara, velo by a pais. He says, what? You're going to tell me Be'emet that it doesn't need? Whoever told you that it doesn't need? But Tanya, we learned in a Braita, whoever was zocheh in the Trumat Adeshin was also zocheh to the Shnei Gizir, which means it's 2 for 1.
It's an exception to the rule.
It's a 2 for 1. Well, 1 second, exactly. No, but once they started it there, then they started for a whole bunch of things. Now, but we did learn over there that the second that a person won the Trumat Adeshin, it was a 2 for 1. It was a package deal. What was the package deal? You got the Trumat Adeshin, you got Shnei Gizir Eitzim as well. But yeah, there were four sets of Hagralot. Yes. Okay. So says the Gemara, Hachi Kamar. This is what it means to say. Not that is for sure that it was a package deal. But if you're going to tell me it's such an important melacha because it's the finishing product of the maracha, the setting up of the mizbeach, so then the opposite, you should do it on its own. Meaning, usually when you do 2-for-1s, it means that it's not that important. Correct? Meaning, if you buy this, okay, you'll get this also as well. Why? They'll throw it in, kilo. No. If you're going to tell me it's so important, it should have had a lottery on itself, by itself. That's what the Gemara is asking. Right? If Isula b'fnei atzma. So says the Gemara, Kedamrinan, right? So answers the Gemara, just like we mentioned, no. That really, from the beginning, they only instituted the pais, right, for the Tumat Deshem by itself. And there was a separate one for the Sidush Negziritzim. But then what happened is that nobody came for the Trumat Hadeshen, because the Trumat Hadeshen was not important on itself. Meaning the Trumat Hadeshen on itself was not that important. So in order to make it important, they gave the Sidush Negziritzim with the Trumat Hadeshen, so people were running for it. So I mean, basically it was the exact opposite. It wasn't that the Negziritzim was not important and we threw it on to the Trumat Hadeshen. The opposite. The Trumat Hadeshen wasn't that important. Because remember, it was just taking off ashes. Removing, it's like the cleanup job. How many people do the cleanup job? But they don't realize that the cleanup job is the most important job. Why is it the most important job? Not only for the next, Yoshua bin Nun became Yoshua bin Nun. Why? Because he used to set up, right? He used to actually do the cleaning up. He used to set up the safsalim, he used to set up the benches, he used to set up the things. That's how he became Yoshua bin Nun. He wasn't the smartest of everybody. But he became Yoshua bin Nun because he was a Mesharet Moshe. A person that serves for the community, a person that comes and he serves, he gets the greatness. Nobody else. Not because of the greatness of wisdom. Yoshua bin Nun was not the greatest of wisdom. Never. Not when he was for the Miraglim. If you look in the order of importance, he wasn't there the most important. Not after. He was never the most important in greatness. He was never there in greatness. You know why? He was Misharet. He was a person and a lot of people don't realize that. You'll have a lot of people that will come and they want to be learning the entire time. Helping out, nothing. Let everyone else do all the work for me. And I said, let them all do the work for me. I'm not going to raise my finger. Yeah, I'm learning all the time. Yeah, but you don't realize that if that's what you're going to do, you're never going to become great. Right? And we see this time and time again, whether it was with Abai and Rava, that they were the Talmidim, they were the children of Eliah Cohen. And we know that Eliah Cohen had a curse that the descendants always died at 20. And then you had that Rava lived until 40 because he learned Torah, but Abaye lived until 60 because he had Chesed and Torah. So you see that the Chesed in itself, right, actually comes above. It added another 20 years to his life. The Torah, for sure, it added another 20. But then you had the Chesed with the Torah, it added actually another 20. So he was 60 instead of 40. A big difference, right? You ask the person, how much would you pay to live from 40 to 60? You know how much millions a person would be willing to do? You know what it is? Another 20 years of life. But a person would just realize that. So therefore, what we're trying to say here, though, is exact opposite. The Trumat Hadeshen became not important. So since the Trumat Hadeshen was not important, what happened? They had to attach it something which was important, which is Shnei Gezeitzim, which at the end was the exact opposite of Shkafa that we thought. We thought the Shnei Gezeitzim was not important. So it was a 2-for-1. You did the Trumat Hadeshen, you get the Shnei Gezeitzim. Now it's the opposite. The Tumat Hadeshen was not important, and you had to attach the Shnei Gezeitzim, the 2 blocks of wood, in order to make it important. Okay? So says the Gemara, Lemeimra, are you going to say, Davodat Tamaz Zara Vezar Chayav Alea Mita Baya Pius? Are you going to tell me that when you have a complete avodah, which means an avodah which completely finishes, and a person would be Chayav Mita, if a Zar does it, meaning a stranger does it, he's going to be obligated the death penalty from Shemaim. You're going to tell me that you always need Pius? And if en zal chayav alei mita, now if the stranger is not going to be chayav mita, bidei shemayim, then you don't need pius. What about the shchita? Shchita is kashera bezar. Can a stranger do shechita? Yes. That's already from Shemuel HaNavi. Shemuel HaNavi, we already know that. Shchita bezar. Shchita, any type of shchita in the Bet HaMikdash could have been done with zar. I don't need Eli with all the kavod to him that he's a kohen. I'm allowed to come and do the shchita. He can't stop me. There is a mitzvah lechatechila to still give it to the kohen, but it's keshera bezar, which means if I wanted to do shchita, you want to do shchita, you want to do shchita, you want to do shchita, anybody can do shchita.
Yeah, but for chavat korbanot.
Which one?
It's not me'akev. It's only receiving
yes,
the
for any
blood.
type of korban. The shchita, if you remember, we learned it from the pasuk. We learned it from the pasuk when it says Zaraku b'nei Aaron HaKohen. So from Kabbalah ve'elach, you needed a kohen, b'nei Aaron HaKohen. Anytime. Which one? Yeah, even for the community. Zara could always do it. Again, Lecha Techila, we always give it to the Kohen. But it's Kshera Bazar. Kshera Bazar means that if a Zara is going to do it, there's no problem.
One got to do the four, receiving the blood.
Receiving the blood. transporting of the blood and the sprinkling of the blood.
One more.
No, the fourth one was a shchita, which that's kosher in the zat. Right? The shchita. So it says over here, what about shchita? It says over here, what about the shchita? The shchita is kshera bazar. Ve'afal pichem, we still do the pais, we still do a lottery. So answers the Gemara, shana shchita d'tchilat tovda diyamamahi. He says, really, be'emet, the shchita, we do it because it's the beginning of the service of Korban Tamid in the morning. So since it's so chaviv to the Kohanim, that's why even though it's kosher for a zar, we still do a lottery for the Kohanim that the Kohanim should do it. Because it's so chaviv, it's the first service. Remember, the first service, the first time that you do something, everybody's running to do it. Yeah? Afterwards, no. You see that in everything. You understand?
Shabbos, you get a crowd. Meyer, sometimes not so well.
Yeah, because it's already towards the end of the day. People are tired. People, but again, but that's the way it is. You see that also.
Yeah.
After Pesach, how much does the first pizza pie go for? Right? I remember they used to sell it in certain pizza stores and Shemtos, all these things. They used to sell it for $100. The first pie, the first pizza.
It was just
after Pesach.
they would give it to
It's
charity.
precious.
They would give
They used to give it to charity, but it was precious, right? Who wants the first pizza after Pesach? People would imagine.
They would have an auction.
They would have an auction. You know what that is? An auction. Well, I want that first pie. You understand? I want it. You understand? So it says, Lememra de avodat tama by pius, avodat sheish acharei avodah lo by pius, pais. Are you going to tell me? Sorry, I said pius instead of pais. Are you going to tell me that by avodat tama, which means a full avodah, an avodah that you finish it off, you need a lottery, but an avodah that has another avodah afterwards, you don't need a lottery? Varevarim mutarim. What about the Evarim Tarim? We already mentioned this at the top of the page when we spoke today, which means that sometimes it's done after nighttime, because remember, it's still going to be done even after the nighttime of the Trumat Hadeshin, and still we do a pais for it, we still do a lottery for it. So answers the Gemara, Sof Avodah Di'imamihi. No, it's the end of the service of the day. So says the Gemara, Hare Trumat Hadeshin. So we do it for the Trumat Hadeshin, and we just said that the Trumat Hadeshin, right? We said that what? We do the pais, even though sometimes there is an avodah afterwards because they have to come out and take out all the other deshin as well. So answers the Gemara, Mishuma Seshaya, because of the story that happened, that whether it was that he threw one person through the friend. No, there were two stories. The first one was he pushed him and he broke his leg, and the second one he stabbed him. You understand? So because of the two different stories. So it says the Gemara, Amar Morzutra, says Morzutra, Vitim and Ravashi, and Seven say Ravashi, Afan and Amitinina, we also learned it in the Mishnah, which is going to be the beginning of the next Perek, where it says, Amar Lahem Emuneh, the Muneh said, Suru, im yigia zman shchita. He used to tell them, go check if the time the shchita came for the Korban HaTamid. V'ilu zman sidur gzeitzim noktan. He didn't say the time of the Shnei Gzeitzim. Why? It says over here, because it comes out that the sidur Shnei Gzeitzim has nothing to do with Alot HaShachar. It's actually part of the Avodat HaLayla. So because of that, it's not part of the Seder Evarim, but the Avodat HaYom, which was done after Shchitat HaTamid, that was part of the day. So that was the Sidur Shnei Gzeitzim. So because of that, it's an Avodat Tama. And the Sidur of the Evanim on the fire is already another Avodah. It's not the same Avodah. Right? So says the Gemara, that's not true. Why? He says, why? Really, Be'emet, I wanted to say that Sidur Shnei Gzeitzim is Avodat HaYom. It's a service of the day. It's not of the nighttime. Right? So why didn't he say, go check if it already arrived the time? He says, because we're talking about things which have no takana if you do it. You can't fix it. You can't fix it. Meaning that if you right now, you did the shchita and it was done during the nighttime, it's pasul. It's not a good sacrifice. So therefore, that's why we had to say, go check if it's already the time that you could do it, because if you would have done it earlier, it's not good. Which one? The Korban HaTamid. If you would have done the Korban HaTamid at nighttime, the shchita of the Korban HaTamid at nighttime, you're not used to.
That's why the guys checked it.
That's why you have to check
to see if the sun was lit up.
The sun was already there or not. Yeah? Or Pehil Penim Mizrach, whatever we're going to see now. Okay, but the one that has no takana, sorry, but if it does have a takana, which means if it would have been done at nighttime. So for example, if they would have put the 2 blocks of wood in the nighttime, right, just like the Siduro Balayla, you could have done it, so too you could put them on in the nighttime. Noktani, we didn't teach it, because if you would have done the Shnei Gzeitzim at nighttime, it would have been kosher.
There's no way you can go back and redo it.
No. It's not that you're already a Tzechova. Meaning things which with diavad were good. Right. No, the Korban HaTamid, that's it. It was pasul. You have to do another one. Bring another one. Yeah, you could do another one, but you would need to fix that. But you just keep, exactly, you can't fix that one. There's no remedy to it. Okay. It wouldn't be kosher. No. But if you do it too early, it's not as one. So that's it. Okay, Adran Alach Barishuna. So we finished the first chapter of Masechet Yoma, the first perek. We're starting now the second perek. The third perek. We just finished the second perek. Amar lahem Memuneh, said the Memuneh, right? We're on the bottom of Kafchet Amud Aleph. Seul u im igi azman shchita. So he used to tell them, go check if it's already the time of the shechita. Imigia, if it already arrived the time. Haroe Omer, so the Ruah, the one that's saying, said, Barkai. Yeah, Barak. Where is it? Yeah, Barkai. What is Barkai?
It's shining.
It's already shining, right? It's already, the Amud HaShachar started shining its light. Right? That's Barak. It shines, right? Why is lightning called Barak? Because it illuminates the nighttime, right? It's
Everybody says this happens before the sun rises.
Yes, 100%. This is but it begins,
It's
right?
dawn?
Dawn. Right? Remember, there's dawn, and then there's
What's the word for dawn again in Hebrew?
Amud HaShachar, or Alot HaShachar.
Alot HaShachar.
Alot HaShachar or Amud HaShachar, same thing. Okay? And then, but the truth is, it's not 100% true because we're going to see now there's Heid Pnei Mizrach. Heid Pnei Mizrach is a little bit after Amud HaShachar. Okay? And that's, by the way,
green and blue.
Even,
green and blue.
no, that's even after, the green and blue is Masechet, right? Which there's a machloket there in the Mishnah, whether it's green and blue or seeing your friend. And we're going to see, but the Heid Pnei Mizrach is before the recognizing your friend of the green and blue. It's before Mishaki, but it's after Amud HaShachar.
I want a chart.
And listen carefully before you jump, right? And what happens though is that even halacha l'maaseh there's that, because everyone thinks that you're allowed to pray shachrit from Amud HaShachar. It's not 100% accurate, because really Maran even brings down that it's Heid Pnei Mizrach. So there's Heid Pnei Mizrach is a little bit after Amud HaShachar. So we're going to see, right? We're going to see now. It says here, Imigia, right? Imigia, Haroe Amar Bakai. Matya ben Shmuel says, Heid Pnei Mizrach, Kol Pnei Mizrach, says if the entire eastern horizon became lit, that's Heid Pnei Mizrach, Ad Shebechevron, until Chevron, Vehu Omer, Hen, then he would say yes. So they asked him, meaning he would come and he would say, Barkai. Barkai means it's already illuminated. So he says, what? Heid Kol Pnei Kol Mizrach Ad Shebechevron? He says, yes. Was the entire sky illuminated until Chevron, right? He says, yes. So why would you need that? Right? Why would you need it so much? Right? So he says, Shepam achat ala meora levana v'dimu she'ira mizrach. Because it once happened that the moon was illuminating, that it looked like mamash, it was light. So it looked like Heid Pnei Mizrach. And what did they do? Shachtu et tamid. They went and they did a shchita, the korban tamid. And then they realized it was too early. And then they had to take it out to Bet Srifa because it was kochim that became pasul. So there's a mitzvah to burn it. So in order to not to make the same mistake, they had to see, and they had to be able to see on top of the mountains that it's even until Chevron. They had to see the entire thing to make sure that there was no mistakes here. It wasn't just the moon. Like sometimes you have that, by the way, especially in the middle of the month. When it's the middle of the month, that's when the moon is a full moon. Mamash, the moon illuminates. Nowadays, we don't even see the moon. The reason why we don't see the moon is because there's so much light of external, the light. No, but you're talking about, here we were talking about that you could actually even see the moon. We're not talking about that you can't see the moon. You see the moon, but you don't benefit from the light of the moon because there's so much light, which is artificial light, right? That there is. You don't benefit from the moon. Go to the desert, go to places where there's no light, and all of a sudden you'll see it's incredible how much light. Yeah, 100%. Okay, so continues the Mishnah. Horidu akohen gadol, right? Lebet hatvila. So then, after came the time the Korvat Tamid, they brought down the Kohen Gadol to the Bet Tvila, to the mikveh. This is the general rule. Haya b'mikdash, kol ha-mesachet raglav ta'um tvila. Any Kohen that was mishamesh in the Bet HaMikdash, he had to go to do number 1. Right? Or number 2, actually, it says over here. Michse. It says here, Mishnah mechanet hayotze lenekavim gedolim b'lashon mesachet raglav mishum sheyitzrich lenekavim gedolim korei al birkav. Right, but he has to actually bend on his knees and then he covers his body. So that's what's nekavim gedolim. He needs to do number 2. So anybody it's mesechet raglav ta'um tevilah, he needs to do tevilah in the mikveh before he actually. That means if a person has to do his necessities, he would have to do tevilah. But if you're only doing number 1, right, ta'um kiddush adayim raglaim, then you only have to do kiddush adayim raglaim, which means it all depends what you do. If a person had to go to the washroom and do their necessities, so if it was for gedolim, as they call it in Hebrew, which means right, number 2, right? Mikvah. So then they would need to do the mikveh. If it was only number 1, right? So then it was only hands and feet. Okay? Says the Gemara, Kafchet Amubet, 28b. Says the Gemara, Tanya, we learned in the Braita, Rabbi Yishmael Omer, Rabbi Yishmael says, Barak Barkai. Yeah, what does it mean? He actually used to say not just Barkai, he used to say Barak Barkai. So you see, Barak is illuminating. Yeah, Barak Barkai. So he comes and he says, Rabbi Akiva says, Allah Barkai. Not Barak Barkai, Allah Barkai, which means it was Allah HaShachar So that's why he's saying that. So Nachuma ben Apakishion Omer, right? Apakishion Omer. Af Barakai bechevron. He actually had to say it was also Barakai in Chevron even. And Matiyah ben Shmuel Amuneh al Piyasot Omer, and Matiyah ben Shmuel, the one that was in charge of the lottery, used to say, Heir Penei Kol HaMizrach bechevron. Yehuda ben Metera Omer, Heir Penei Kol HaMizrach ad bechevron. V'yatzeu kol ha'am ish ish lemlachto, and people went out to work. So basically, again, these are just different opinions of what was the message, right, of this Kohen when he used to say that basically we're already able to come and do this korban. What was the message? Okay? So says the Gemara, Ihachi, if you're going to tell me that it's the last one, which is basically that everyone went out to work, so Nagale Tuva, so then it's even very light outside. You understand? Because that means that Mamash, if people are going out to work, right, that means, so he says, no, liskor poalim kamin. We're not talking about that they went out to work. We're talking about the Baalei Batim that are looking for workers went out to look for workers. Not that they actually, because usually they would go out to work a little bit later, but they were looking for workers. So they had to go out early to look for the workers, so that way they could already bring them in by the time that they came. Amar of Safra, says of Safra, Tzilote de Abraham. Yeah, Miki Meshachre Kotle. Yeah, he says the tefillah of the afternoon of Abraham Avinu. I don't know why of Abraham Avinu.
We're talking about now mincha. We're talking about the mincha.
It says here, Af pi sharashi korel tefillah zu tefillat ha'erev, en kavanato to arvi, but rather mincha, because the time is after chatzot. But why is that Abraham's tefillah? Baruch Hashem, who asks it? The Rishonim on us. The Rishonim here asks, harem v'ar bebrachot, that Abraham Avinu tiken tefillat shachrit, and Yitzchak was the one that did mincha. So then why are we calling it tefillat mincha? That's Tzilotei de Abraham. So Tosfot Yishanim come and they answer that even though Yitzchak was the one that he instituted tefillat mincha, like a chova, nevertheless Avraham Avinu always prayed mincha, and that's why it was called Tzilotei de Avraham during that time. Exactly. Yeah. That means Avraham Avinu did pray it, but it was him that he actually prayed it, right?
He paved the way.
Exactly. Okay. Fine. So now he comes and he says as follows. Okay. He comes and he says like this. He comes and he says, Tzilotei de Avraham. The tefillah of Avraham Avinu, which was during the afternoon, it says it's Miki Mishachre Kotle. It's mitzad. It's during the time from mitzad mizrachi shel aktalim matchil lashchir, which means that when you look at the eastern side of the walls, they start becoming black, which means chatzot. Because remember, what happens by chatzot? What? Not exactly. Remember.
1 o'clock, 1:30, isn't it?
Remember one more time, Richard. Chatzot is the real time of mincha. We add on another half an hour, which is Mincha Gdola. Mincha Gdola is half an hour after Chatzot, but technically speaking, Chatzot is the Chatzot. Now, Chatzot is when the sun is exactly halfway over. Because remember, it rises in the east and it sets in the west. During the half day time, which is Chatzot, it's not 12 o'clock, right? But it's 12 o'clock, even though we call it midday, it's not midday. Midday is meant when it's you take the full day and you do midday, right?
Straight down,
exactly.
So a little bit more than it looks
exactly.
Like
Okay. Yeah, no, but then that's what he's saying. He says once the walls start becoming blackened, that's already right when it's already started. So Amar Rav Yosef, Ana me Abraham nekum v'nekum. Right. Well, we could actually learn from Avraham Avinu and to be zrizim and mitzvot like him to pray mincha immediately. So Amar Rava says Tana gaman me Avraham the Ana lo gamina mine. Says what are you talking about? For sure. If the Tana learned it from Avraham Avinu, so what? We're not going to learn from Avraham Avinu. The Tana was learned in a Braita. On the 8th day, he went and he did brit milah to Yitzchak. So since it's written we already know that the entire day is kosher. You could do brit milah the entire day. But zrizim, they do it right away, the earliest that they can. That Avraham woke up in the morning, right, and he did it. What does that mean? We learn from the zrizut of Avraham Avinu, right? That a person has to do it as early as possible. Meaning, even though the entire day is kosher, he used to do it as early as possible. Okay? Ela Marava, but rather Rava comes and he says, Rav Yosef HaKakashele, Rav Yosef had the question, we learned in the Mishnah, Chalad ve'Pesachim li'o be'erev Shabbat. If right now Erev Pesach falls out on Erev Shabbat, Nishchat b'sheshu mechza. They used to do the Korban HaTamid 6.5 hours into the day, right? Which is basically half an hour after Chatzot. This is the Mincha Gdola. It was brought 7.5 hours into the day. So says the Gemara, 1 second. Why don't we do the shchita miki mishachre kel kol? Just do it immediately after chatzot. Why did you have to wait until an hour after? Right? That's what it says. Not an hour, half an hour after chatzot. Do it immediately during chatzot. So says the Gemara, my kushia. What's the question? ודילמה כותלי דבית המקדש, בשש ומחצה משחרר, משום דלו מרחב נטובה. Maybe באמת, we're going to say that the walls of the Bet HaMikdash were becoming like black, right? Why? From the 6.5 hours, because they weren't skufim v'shanim, they weren't 100% straight. So since they weren't straight, right, that means basically there was thick in the bottom, and then it became thinner and thinner above. So therefore, once the shemesh was in the middle of the horizon, right, the second, even if it's going to be a little bit to the west, there was still no tsel, there was no shade on the ktalim, there was no shade on the walls. So says the Gemara, right? He comes and he says, Inami, or you could have another answer. Shane Avram Avinu was different. That he was a very big mumche in the stars and everything. He was an expert in these things. That's why astrology. So that's why he was able to do it exactly when it's Chatzot Yom. But we can't be so precise. That's what we just say. Do it half an hour afterwards to make sure that you got the right time, right? Inami, or a third answer, Nishum de Zaken v'Yoshev b'Yeshiva, which means, right, that since he was a Zaken and Yoshev b'Yeshiva, so it means only on Avraham Avinu he could pray after Chatzot because he was a Chacham and he didn't make a mistake in time. Meaning, youngsters, we could make mistakes, right? These people, they've seen it, they realize, they have the experience, they know, so they're not going to make a mistake. Yeah? Da'amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, says Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, never since our forefathers did yeshiva actually stop from them, which means that they always used to sit and learn. Hayu b'Mitzrayim, right? Yeshiva imahem. When they were in Mitzrayim, they had a yeshiva with them. Shneimar lech v'asotat ziknei Yisrael. Hayu b'Midbar, when they were in the desert, yeshiva imahem. They had a yeshiva. Shneimar l'svali ziknei Yisrael. Avraham Avinu zaken yoshev yeshiva ya. Shneimar v'Avraham zaken b'yamim. Yitzchak Avinu zaken yoshev yeshiva ya. Shneimar v'hi ki zaken Yitzchak. Yaakov Avinu was zaken yoshev yeshiva ya. He was elderly and he was sitting in yeshiva. Shneimar v'nei Yisrael kavdu mizoken. Eliezer Avraham zaken yoshev yeshiva ya. Shneimar v'Avraham zaken beto mashav b'chol shelo. So you see from here, right, that everything continues coming and telling you that they were always a Kenya Shabbat. They were always sitting and learning. So he says, Amar Rabbi Elazar says Rabbi Elazar, we're going to now analyze the last pasuk where we were talking about Eliezer Eved Avraham, that he was Zekan Beto Moshel Bechol Shelo. It says, what does it mean, right? Zekan Beto Moshel Bechol Shelo. Moshel Betorat Rabo. He was an expert in the Torah of his rabbi. Meaning he knew very, very, very well the Torah of his rabbi. Right? Who the Masechet Eliezer? This is the Masechet Eliezer. He was doleu mashke. He used to draw forth like the water, and he used to give to drink the water of his rabbi to other people. Meaning he used to be like a sponge. He used to get all the water, and then he used to give it right to other people as well. Okay. So now it says, Amar Rav. Rav says, Kihem Avraham Avinu kol Torah kula. Avraham Avinu, he actually fulfilled the entire Torah. Shneimar, but it says in pasuk, Ekev asher shema Avraham bekuli. What does it mean? Ekev v'yishmor mishmarti. Right, many times the Torah, the Gemara does that. That means really it's from the last part where it says v'yishmor mishmarti b'tzutav v'chukot v'toratai. But the Gemara just brought down the first part of the pasuk, and then it just says v'gomer. So Amal Shimi Barachia l'Rav says Shimi Barachia to Rav ve'ema sheva mitzvot. Why don't we just say that he only did sheva mitzvot b'Noach? Kavchet amubet. You have Entiot Shobeh, 28b in the middle or towards the end actually. Right, so he said, why don't we just say that Avraham Avinu only fulfilled the 7 mitzvot in Enoch? He didn't fulfill the entire Torah. So says the Gemara, Haikanama Milah. What about Bri Milah? Bri Milah is not one of the 7 Noahidite mitzvot, right? These are the commands, right? Obviously, Milah is not there. So says the Gemara, okay, fine. So just say 7 mitzvot, Milah. Maybe it's the 7 mitzvot, I mean Bri Milah. So Amalei, he says, if so, what is that? I could understand. So then what does it mean? Mitzvotai v'torotai. When you bring down also, right? If it was only the Sheva mitzvot and Bri Milah, so what does it mean mitzvotai v'torotai? Like, what does that mean? Obviously, if it says it in plural like that, it means something much more.
Statutes.
The statutes, right? So he comes and he says, Amar Rava, Rava says, V'item Ravashi, Kiyem Avraham Avinu filu eruvet avshilim. He did even eruvet avshilim. Shneimar torotai. What does it mean torotai? Achat Torah shebichtev ve'achat Torah sheb'alpeh. When it says torotai in plural, there's only one Torah. It says no. It's Torah shebichtev and Torah sheb'alpeh. The oral Torah explains the written Torah, Torah shebichtev. So therefore, when it says torotai in plural, it's actually referring to both. Okay? So Matya ben Shmuel Omer. Matya ben Shmuel says, Vehu Omer, right? Now we stopped, right? We go back, we finished with Avraham Avinu. Now we go back to the story about whatever he said, whether it was he said Barak Barkai, Allah Barkai, or all these different things. Her Pene Kol Mizrach Shebechevron, Vehu Omer, Hen. He says yes. Says the Gemara, Man Omar Hen. Who's the one that said yes? If you're going to tell me that it's the guy that's standing on the roof, and he's the one Hu chalim v'hu mafshid. Right? He says what? This person is cholem upoter et hachalom itself, which means he's going to answer on his own question. For sure not. Right? Meaning, who's answering yes? Right? So he says, because again, one more time, if it's going to be that he had to say the words, so now what he's going to say, yes? Well, he's answering his own question. He was one that said it. Now he's going to answer his own question. So says the Gemara, Ella, but rather, yeah, he says, Ella hachdekai aara menayada. Right? If somebody's going to be on the ground, right, he's the one that's going to say yes. How's he going to know? How's he going to know? Imagine right now, Eli Cohen is down here, right? He's down there. There's a guy up there on the roof. He's looking. He tells everybody, hey, and now if he's going to say it as a question, what, do you think he could answer yes? He can't see. If he can't see, how's he going to say, yes, it's Heir Penei Kol Mizrach? Doesn't make sense. But now if it's the same guy up there, so what's he asking? Right? If you answer hen means yes. Yes means you're answering a question. Right? So then what are you saying? It's not a statement. Heir Penei Kol Mizrach Shebechevron hen. Well, you're just saying a statement and hen is yes? There's something we're missing here. You understand? There's something that's wrong. So he comes and he says, Ella barad ben yada. So says the Gemara, you could say both. How? If you're going to tell me it's the one that's on the top, Amar Ihu, the one that's seeing Me'alagag, he's going to say, Heir Penei Kol Mizrach. Right? He's just going to say the Penei Kol Mizrach lit up. Amar Lei, the one that's going to come and ask him, the one that's down here, Ad Shebechevron, until Chevron, and then he's going to answer yes. Meaning it wasn't that it was one full statement that it was Heir Penei Kol Mizrach until Bechevron, because then what's the yes? It was Heir Penei Kol Mizrach. They ask him until Chevron, he says yes. So that's one answer. Second answer, the one that's on the ground. Amar Ihu, the one which is on the ground, he was the one that asked the question. Heir Penei Kol Mizrach. So he says, he said, Ad Shebechevron. Right, what? Until Chevron? He says, hen, yes. Which means that was my kavanah. Meaning that it was purposely done in a way that the question was only half of a question, but then he was going to continue with the question. Hen, yes. Right, the one that's down here would say, yes, it was until Chevron. Okay? Fine. Now, I don't know what happened afterwards. According to this answer, what was the answer afterwards? I don't know. Right? So that's why I don't know. This answer, I didn't know. Think about it. So what was the answer then? Right? You're on the ground. You're coming and you're telling the guy up there, right? He's going to say, Heir Penei Kol Mizrach, right? You're going to say, Heir Penei Kol Mizrach. He's going to say, Ad Shebechevron. You're going to say yes. And then what?
That's what I want to know.
Right,
See,
exactly.
That's what I wanted to know. He said they can do the Tamid. They can start the checking.
Right. Okay. So, Velama Utzecha Lakach. Says the Gemara, why did you need such a thing? So says the Gemara, and then we answer because of the mistake. If you remember, because of the moonlight that made a mistake, so they always wanted to know. So says the Gemara, Mi Machlit, can you really make such a mistake? Right? Can you make a mistake with the light of the moon, right, and the light of the sun? But Tanya, we learned in a bright Rabbi Omer. Rabbi says, Eno dome timur shel levana, the timur shel chama. It's not the same light. The keren or this light of the sun and the light of the moon are two completely different things. Why? Timur shel levana metamer ve'oleh kemakel. The light of the moon goes up straight like a makel, like a stick. Timur shel chama maftzia lekan u'kan. The light of the sun splits up. It radiates. I don't know what the word is.
Diffuses.
Diffuses. Thank you. That's a good word, right? No, it comes from the art school. Don't worry. It's
That's
not
an art.
exactly. Don't give him so much credit. Yeah, fine. Yeah, it diffuses, right? It goes all over the place. You understand? So that's why it's doing it like that. So says the Gemara, Tanad Rabbi Ishmael, Yoma Meunan Haya. It was a cloudy day. So since it was cloudy, so therefore even the moon's light would also diffuse because of the clouds. Remember, the clouds diffuses. It makes people, right, confused. Okay? Remind me that that's how we speak about it on Shavuot night. If it's Yom Meunan, there was a famous Gemara in Bab Batra to do with, if you're going to find that Atzeret was Yom Meunan, was a cloudy day, so then do you know when to plant or what not to plant? It was with Achitofel when he gave advice to his children. It's beautiful. It has to do with Shavuot, right? About learning the Torah, so on and so forth. Fine. Says the Gemara. Amar Rav Papa says, Shmamia, we learn from here, right? So he says, Yoma De'eva, that a Yoma Meunan, Kule Shimsha.
Wait a minute. Where are you? You skipped.
No, I didn't skip.
Spread the skin.
It's a cloudy day.
There you are, Papa. You're right.
Okay, very good.
Sorry.
No problem. Amar Rav Papa says, Shema Mina, we learn from here Yoma de'eva, which means a day which is cloudy, kule shimsha. Any place, right, the shemesh will get. Even in a place where usually it's actually a place of shade, all of a sudden the sun will get there because of the clouds. Meaning the clouds are going to cause that all of a sudden the light will get everywhere, right? What's the nafkamina? In order that the orot should get dried, which means that on the day which is cloudy, right, they would actually get dried anywhere where you're going to put them. Inami, or another nafkamina. Rava says, a woman shouldn't need the dough for Pesach because she has to be careful that it doesn't become chametz. So she shouldn't do it not in the sun, right? Because basically the heat of the sun, right? Or not in the heat of in the water which was heated up in the sun. Which means that, and if you remember, Rabbi Mansour spoke about this when he came, if you remember, that when it's going to be heat, meaning when do we say that 18 minutes is the time for something to become chametz? That's only in normal circumstances. But if you add heat to the equation, it could become chametz even quicker. So here it's saying a woman cannot knead the dough of Pesach in the sun, because if she's going to do that, it could become chametz. Or even outside on a cloudy day. Why? Because the sun is getting everywhere. Right? Because the sun is getting everywhere. So because the same thing. Why? Because the heat is actually going to make it become chametz much quicker. So Amar Rav Nachman says Rav Nachman, Zoama de Shimsha, the chom of the shemesh, right? The heat of the sun when it's on the cloudy day, kashe mishimsha, is actually even worse than the shemesh in itself. Meaning the heat of a sun on a cloudy day is stronger than the heat of a regular sun. The simanech, what's a siman? Dana de chala, tzinzenet chometz. When you take vinegar, right, that is very, very closed, in order that nothing comes out, right? It says if you're going to make a small hole in it, right, that it's going to be a strong smell coming out. So too the chom hashemesh. When it's going to break through, right, through the ananim, so then it becomes even stronger, meaning it's more concentrated. And by the way, you should know this actually happens with everything in life, right? If you're going to have, for example, you're going to come and you're going to make holes in many different places, right, of a bottle. So what happens? So the water will come out from the holes. If you only puncture one hole, what happens? It's going to break through much stronger. Why? Because there's only one way to go out, right? So therefore, it's much more concentrated. So he comes here and he says the same thing. If you have a jar of vinegar and you only make one hole, the strong will be
aroma coming out
is much stronger than if just you just had different openings. So he says the same thing. The fact that you have the sun, which is its rays, is only breaking through in one point. That's why it's going to be much stronger. Shavride de shimsha, the karnei shemesh, which are going through these ananim, kashu mishimsha. Also, these rays are stronger than the sun itself. The simanech. So what's the siman? The karnei shemesh. The karnei shemesh. Okay. Before we were talking about the zoama is the chom, right? Now we're talking about the karnei shemesh. Before is the heat, and now we're talking about the rays. The rays, the way that they shine out, it says is actually stronger, meaning that you could look at the sun. It's not good to look at the sun. The rays, the lights, los rayos, right? The rays of the sun. But right, when you're looking at the sun, it's not good to look at the sun, right? You have to be very, very careful. You destroy your eyes. But he says it's more dangerous to look at the rays of the sun than looking at the sun.
This I didn't know. I'm not so sure about that, but
listen, Richard.
You can't burn your retinas.
You look, but you burn yourself, right? Yeah. But the rays are stronger.
So on the side.
Yeah, they have more power. No, but again, because of the clouds. We're talking about the clouds. Usually, if you look at the sun, you cannot really see the rays. You just see the sun. But when it's cloudy, sometimes you only see the rays. So those rays are stronger than the sun in itself.
But I'm not sure you could burn your retina by looking at
I don't know.
rays.
Here it says simanech dilfa. Right? What is dilfa? דלף היורד על האדם, שקשה לסבול אותו יותר מאשר להכניס את כל גופו למים. If you have, for example, you have a drip, right? Somebody was just telling me about leaks in their houses and the roofs.
Yes.
Right? So if you have all of a sudden dip, drip, that's much more than if somebody's just going to put their entire body in water. Now, why? You could go into the sea, you could go in a swimming pool, and you won't care. But you're going to hate that the drip on top of your head. You understand? Or on top of your body. You understand? So the same thing. And then we're going to continue with Yirudei Avira Kashim Avira. That Bezat Hashem will be tomorrow's daf.